actually, I also remember you because the two of us were judges at the John Lewis J Lab last year.
Yeah.
And I think one of the winners from last year is actually presented.
Oh, right. Okay, cool.
So,
Which one? Do you remember?
Other things I can say, you sold your business to EMA for 35x EBITDA, nice work. And then you took 5 years off. That must be nice to be able to do that.
It was.
Building, what were you doing? Like having a lot of showers and dreaming up your next moonshots?
Right. Well, I invested in a few little startups, but...
Okay. And now you're on to your next phase of business. And that is the Stylus Media Group, online B2B. And you're focusing on all sorts of consumer brands. Which brings us to the focus of today's panel. So can we call the panelists up to stage, please? And it is about the connected consumer. And who better than Mark to really talk about that, given he's really focusing on consumers. So the panelists, please come on up. And with that, over to you, Mark.
Thank you. Guys, wherever you like. Wherever you like. So good morning, everybody. Hope we're going to have a very interesting panel for you. We're going to be talking about the connected consumer. But before we do, it's my pleasure to introduce and give you a little bit of background on the various, on our four panelists. So we're going to start with, and please correct me if I get the pronunciations wrong with all of you, but we're going to start with Ekaterina Almask. Yeah?
Almasque.
Almasque, okay. So Ekaterina invests across many sectors in Europe on behalf of Samsung Electronics. Areas of interest include smart machines and robotics, digital health, storage, data analytics, and much more. Before that, Ekaterina was a founding partner of a global private equity advisory firm specializing in high-tech growth companies, clean tech, and many other sectors in the US, Brazil, and Europe. Eric, on my immediate left, Eric is CEO of Kantar, WPP's data investment management division. With 30,000 employees and 4 billion in revenues. Is that Kantar or is that the whole of WB?
Kantar.
Yeah, that's Kantar alone. With a mix of local clients working on everything from innovation and new product development to optimization of marketing spend, customer satisfaction, cross-media measurement, and ROI. Eric was previously a main board director of WPP, and sharing in common with me is a keen Arsenal supporter. Ellie at the end here, Ellie Uzan, founded the Box Group in 2001. And at the age of 21, after leaving college, began a career that applied technology, strategy, and cross-media platform products. The Box Group is one of Israel's leading content and new media firms, partnering with some of the world's biggest consumer brands to create pioneering interactive campaigns. His vision was to establish a company that would bridge the gap between content and technology while seamlessly integrating all media platforms. And last but not least, and this is where I come a little bit unstuck, because we have Yuri standing in for Jan. Okay? So actually, I'm going to let Jan introduce himself because I don't have a bio on.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Yuri. Those who expected Jan, I'm sorry, unfortunately. Jan is sick as he's sending his regards. So I'm Yuri Voves. I'm also one of the co-founders of Social Bakers. At Social Bakers, I have a position of head of product. And basically, Social Bakers is a company who focuses on social media monitoring, measurement, management, and optimization. So anything that is connected with social media. And I particularly basically talk a lot to clients, talk a lot to markets, looking at the new trends and how can then they be converted into our products. So it's a lot of different touch points.
Great. Okay, so now we know who our panelists are. We're going to start off with some questions about search. So 50% of people do 0 searches per day on mobile. So people aren't really searching and they're blocking display ads. How are brands going to reach them on these devices? Eric, your thoughts?
Well, I think ad blockers obviously come up as a huge topic, and of all of the issues that I think to worry about, I wouldn't put it as top of the list. I mean, partly because more and more of our activity is within app, and the ad blockers are mostly for browsing as opposed to in-app. And I think a lot of the companies who are the main app developers, whether it's an Amazon, an Apple, Facebook or a Google, have got no interest in blocking ads within their apps. So you've got a subset of where ad blocking is happening. And we've seen over the last few weeks some very interesting experiments in Germany, in the UK, where publishers have said to people, if you block apps, you can't get our content for free. So I think we will begin to see much more of a genuine dialogue between companies and people about what's the value of advertising. And at the moment, content is free. People think that all content is free. And obviously a lot of content from the publishers is funded by advertising. And we can't have it both ways. We can't have it that we don't want any ads and we want all of our content to be free. We have to pay for it somehow.
Right.
So I think it will resolve itself, and I think the other issue which needs to resolve itself is privacy, that we need to be much more respectful of people's desire for privacy and to give them the kind of content that they actually want advertising around.
Mm-hmm. Ekaterina, your thought?
Well, I can talk only from the perspective of finding new ideas and new ways of doing advertising. So I think it's true today, users don't want maybe to search directly for things and they block advertising, but at the same time, all the devices become more ubiquitous. So we have more wearable devices, and in the future we will have more connected environments. So there will be much more space to reach the consumer, but also at the same time much more difficult to do that. So I think that advertising and reaching the consumer for brands will also go through revolution and finding new ways how to reach the consumer without actually disturbing or disturbing the privacy and disturbing the environments. I think it will be also maybe a shift from just pushing information to consumer and gathering information when the consumer is not aware, to basically having a dialogue with the consumer and trying to reach him when the consumer is ready. So I have seen recently a very interesting concept. For instance, it was a media company that built a direct connection between artists and consumers, basically giving consumers an opportunity to talk directly to their artists. And I was thinking maybe what a wonderful idea for brands actually to have a direct connection instead of really trying to understand when the consumer is looking for something, having a direct connection. And consumers that love the brand will have always a dialogue with this brand.
Okay. Yuri, your thoughts?
Well, just follow up. I think one of the shifts has been done particularly in social media already. As Eric was saying, people are spending their time a lot in the applications, and we see it on the social platforms. So there are new ways how to reach the customer, for example, through the social platforms, through super targeted, custom audiences and so on. So I think that could be one of the shifts that it's moving into these platforms, which actually allow very very great targeting, and the blocking doesn't really affect them.
Ellie?
I think they pretty much summarize all the points, but I believe that we're shifting from search to social discovery in general, and I think it's in all angles, and it's a different way of consuming that makes a bit more sense in these times, and then there is a lot of benefits in it, even if we lose those audience that is searching in an active way. They still have the social discovery that is pretty huge.
Mm-hmm. So Eric, you mentioned the issue of privacy, which of course is a very, very important subject at the moment. But of course we need to know, advertisers need to know about the consumer to be effective. How does that come into play? I mean, at the end of the day, we don't want to be invasive, yet at the same time we need to know.
I think there's lots of things that need to come together. I mean, the first one is we collect lots of data, just as an example, on people, but a lot of the data we collect is first party. So it's all opt-in. People have given us permission to use their data. And I think it comes back to Ekaterina's point about a different type of relationship with people. That's the best type of relationship. There's no privacy issue there involved. People have given you permission. They want to engage with you. Mm-hmm. there aren't any issues. I think when you go beyond that to lots of the targeting that is going on at the moment, there's a difference between the legal situation where lots of stuff is allowed and a consumer-friendly situation where you need to be aware of what the consumer feels that they've given permission for their data to be used for. And if the consumer has given you data and you have access to that data for a particular thing, and they don't think that they're going to use it in a different context, you shouldn't really be using it.
Right.
So I do think it requires a different type of relationship. But we've seen lots of examples where people are willing to share their data. And I do think that needs to be a more explicit conversation between companies and people as to what data they want to be shared.
Right. Guys, anything you want to add to that, Katrina? Yeah.
Maybe if I may, I think there are three issues in reality. Actually, it's privacy, it's safety of data, and also ownership of data. So on the privacy of data, I think that in the past, consumers were unaware actually where data is going. And now the dialogue has started because everyone wants to know what happens to my data. I don't want a smart TV in my living room that watches me all the time. I want to know what happens to this information and where it ends up. Which leads to the second point, which is the safety of data. Many times our data ended up in places we didn't want it to end up, and it got stolen and resold in black markets. So this is a huge now shift of consumers wanting not only to know that their data is safe, but also wanting to know that this data wouldn't end up somewhere and resold in black markets for some third purposes. And the third point I think is actually the most interesting is the ownership of data. And I think we have too little dialogue today on this question. Actually, when data is generated, the question is who owns this data? Even if I agree in a loyalty program to give my data away, if this data is being used for commercial purposes, maybe it's a good point to have some of the proceeds back to the consumer. So today we see all the business going around reselling data. We have data brokerage. And in the past, maybe it worked, but now there is more and more data, for example, from digital devices, and I'm investing in digital health. So digital health information is being stored somewhere and is used for research, for other purposes, and it's actually the cost of this data today, even if I sell it to research, is about $100 a year. So a lot of consumers realizing that actually it's an asset class. Data is an asset class, and consumers more and more want to control and own this asset class. It doesn't come yet in our thinking today, because even if we think from the taxation perspective, data is not seen as an asset class. If it's growing in value, there is no capitalization tax on this. So it's not even seen in this, but I think in the future more and more dialogue will be open about how to make data actually spread in a fair way, and then consumers might be much more open to share their data because they will see value coming back to them.
Thank you. Yuri?
Maybe I'll just summarize it as data transparency, right? It's like knowing what is happening with my data, and also for the businesses to be fully open what I want to do with the data. How am I going to use it? Having the possibility for the user to opt in, opt out, because I read an article about this also, where there was a survey done on the users, and they said, I'm willing to give my data away if you give me value for that. And then what is the value? It's better services, it's more targeted offers which are relevant to me. And I think that's also going into the direction where I'm able to opt in and opt out. It's very, very close relationship between the company and between the user, because he's able to define right in the beginning how much data he wants to share, and it doesn't mean he's not going to see any ads. It means if I'm not going to allow any data to be shared, then I'm going to see the most general ads or the most general offer, which are not going to be relevant, and I'll probably not be very happy about that. So I think it's going to be a very, very interesting topic in the future, but I think this is like almost customizing your product, right? You're customizing your experience with the data that you're providing.
Right. Ellie?
I think in general it's like any other relationship basically between the brand or the different companies. It could be the broadcasters, and in our case it's about trust and it's about value. It's the value that we give to the audience and the reason for them to give us the data. We see it in many shows we produce at screens, so we see that the audience is giving all their data with first name, last name, pictures, everything there, because they get something in return at the same time, and they don't feel like we use it. And if we do one kind of mistake by publishing the wrong advertising on the wrong place, and they will feel like we are abusing their data, that will be like in any other relationship. We would create a kind of a crisis, even if it's not loud and everybody speaks about it. I think that the users feel it, and we need to be very sensitive when we do that kind of work. From one end to give a lot of value and good reason for it, and the other end is to keep that trust and integrity in everything we publish to them.
And we've seen examples. I mean, if you think about the healthcare space, we've seen examples of where insurance companies in the States give you lower rates if you're willing to share your health data.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could imagine car companies giving you lower rates if you're willing to put some kind of sensor in your car so they know whether you're driving fast or not. So coming back to the point about data has got value, we've all got data that is valuable, and I think people and companies will begin to realize that there is a value exchange to that data.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's talk about multiple platforms, because of course we know that consumers are now connecting across many different platforms. How do you, as marketers, decide what platforms to be on, which are the most important, how you connect the platforms? Katerina, why don't you start on this one?
Well, I think, again, in the future, I think we need to understand very well where the focus of the customer is at the moment. And I think the customer is increasingly becoming digitally connected all the time. So whether it's in an intelligent car, self-driving car, or intelligent home, or otherwise. So, and every second there is some kind of digital device involved. So the question is how to get onto this device where the focus and attention is without disturbing the privacy and life. And I think, again, coming back probably to previous point, I think consumers want to be connected also to offers that are relevant in this particular moment. And if we manage altogether to find a way how to not only know where focus is, but also know contextually what the consumer wants and offer in this particular moment, in this particular device, what consumer wants, this will be the winning proposition. But we are not there yet. We are miles and miles away, and we all work on this. It's an exciting area, an exciting time to be in, but we are miles away, I think.
Yuri?
So maybe I'll comment from the social perspective. When we talk to clients, we always say it's almost like the Fantastic Four, right? It's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. When looking at the platforms, again, following, where the users are the most present, that's where I should be. But this is always we said this is the base where you should be active, where you should be creating your strategies. And then it also depends on the regional base. So it could be from social platforms, Sina Weibo in China. It can be Russian Vkontakte, depending on the activities that you have. But what we always tell to our clients is basically to set up the base where you want to be, and not to be everywhere on all platforms, but to be where you really think you can make an impact, where you really can focus your teams to have a really good activities. And then, for example, try the opportunistic platforms and try them and select 3-4 platforms and see and try some experiments rather than covering it all and not doing anything correctly. So setting up basically the Fantastic Four and then trying opportunistically, either if it's region or it's vertical or it's a closed network, and basically try the activities there and see how it works. And then you can find out that you find a specific use case that works really great just on that platform, and moving forward you can then ingest it into the Fantastic Four.
Mm-hmm. Ali?
I think in general it's about where the user is and where is the user and what is doing and the content related. So it's not about how many platforms and how we integrated all of them. It's more about the need and the user at the time. So if he's in his living room, I believe that we can treat his mobile or one platform as a controller more than even as his first screen. And when he's outside, it needs to, of course, change. And if we look at the different platforms, it's just some of them, of course, don't see the perfect use, and we see that there is kind of an overlap. But I think with the time, it's just making things become brighter and brighter with their usage. So it's more the.
Eric, you want to?
I guess a couple of things. I was in China a couple of weeks ago during what they call Singles Day, the 11th of the 11th, which is their equivalent of Black Friday. And they spent $20 billion just online in terms of purchases. 80% of those purchases were done through a mobile device. So I think, when we talk about platforms, if we think about mobile as a platform, it's very hard not to think of some kind of mobile-first approach. But I think we're more advanced in terms of understanding which platforms to use than I think some people out there think. We do an awful lot of work with Google, with Facebook, with the broadcasters, with the publishers, and have got a pretty good way of actually assessing which platforms deliver the best return on people's investments. And some of it is obviously context specific. If you're trying to drive a transaction or if you're trying to build a brand, those aren't the same things. If you're trying to influence people, that's not the same as actually getting them to buy something. But I think we're actually pretty far ahead in terms of being able to understand which platforms work best, which combinations work best, where you should spend your money. So I think there is quite a lot of technology and understanding around that, a lot more than people think.
Right. Okay. So let's switch tack a little bit. We all want to know what the next big thing is. My research team at Stylus seem to think that virtual reality is going to be the next big development. Of course, it's been around for a while, but it's never really truly taken off. Do we think it's about time? Do we think this is going to be the next big thing? And if not, tell us what is.
Start somewhere else.
Well, let's start at the end. Ellie, go on. Virtual reality first.
So I think,
is it going to happen?
So I think first, yes. I think that the thing is the measure, like how popular it's going to be, if it's going to be a mainstream or not. And I think it's, again, about the content and the experience. But I think that if you speak with people that before they try it and after, you see that this exact question getting a totally different answer. Like from the beginning, you say, okay, this is something I can probably, if we're talking about the Gear or we're talking about any other device, if the Oculus Rift, we see that it's something that from outside it looks, okay, I can probably handle with it product on my face for maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but after you play 1 or 2 games, you feel it's much more, the use is much bigger than you thought, and the capabilities, and you can really dive in and feel that you are there. So I believe that the generation that is, let's say, teenagers and below will adopt it in a totally different way. But this is, there is one of my favorite quotes that I have 1 month to use, so I will use it now, but I think it's describe it pretty nice. It's a Douglas Adams quote after he passed out. He found it in one of his books, and it says, I came up with a set of rules that describe our reactions to technologies. Everything that is invented in the world when you were born is normal and ordinary, and it's just the way the world works. Everything is invented between your 15 to 35 is new and revolutionary, and you can probably get a career in it. And everything that is invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things. I'm in a second there, so I can use it. But I think it's also regarding the Oculus. Every time I see it and I see a kid, how we treat that product and how I treat it, or even people in our team, it's a bit different. We do it from a theoretical place, and they are just embracing it in a totally different way. That was a long answer, but...
Yuri, going to happen? Not going to happen?
I hope so. I really hope so. I'm really excited, and I think that's one thing that connects when you talk with people about it. Generally, they are very excited that it's coming, right? And I think that's the first measure of success. People are really excited to try it. For marketers, or for brands, what it brings is it's gonna be another platform, right? So how can you take the content that you have now and transform it to virtual reality? So we saw the same change from traditional media to, let's say, social, and then to virtual reality as well. So how can you create that experience that it's gonna be revolutionary? And I think virtual reality can really easily do it, because suddenly you can put people somewhere where they've never been before. You don't have to suddenly give away tickets. That you can upload a software and they can try it by themselves.
Right.
And the next phase, I think, would be how can we then make virtual reality part of our everyday life to really spread it, so that we are in touch with it every day. And I think that's where the real use case will be.
Ekaterina, do you think it's going to be part of everyday life?
I believe so, yes. And I think, virtual reality is actually part of many people's life today. Augmented reality, it started to happen, but then a lot of people realized that technology-wise it's not there yet, because it kind of, the motion is still slow, so it makes a lot of people dizzy. But so many smart people are working on this today, so I think in 2 years' time we will have really nice products. So the issue or the challenge with augmented reality is for advertising is the same way you can actually put advertising in the scene, the same way you can blend it. So I saw technology just a couple of days ago that allows you to blend any logo of any brand in your reality scene. So if you have a cup of coffee, the brand will be blended. So I think, again, here we come to the thing. So if consumer will see value of putting this brand dialogue in the scene of reality, in augmented reality, they will allow it to happen. If not, they might want to switch everything off and just to see the nature and buildings without anything.
But didn't Google Glass say the same thing? And look what happened to that.
Sorry?
Google Glass. Yeah, didn't they also say that was going to happen? And
well, I think that it's all a question of technology advances. So the technology has advanced immensely since the first version of Google Glass went out. So today, actually, when first Google Glass went out, there was no technology to focus, to know where you're focused, where your eyes are focusing. So today, Magic Leap and all these things happen. So it's much more advanced. There are companies in Israel working on similar topics. When you bring all these pieces together, actually, I believe it will happen very soon. So it's just a matter of time.
Eric, any thoughts?
We've got some apps that aren't kind of the most advanced virtual reality, but are virtual reality. And we've got one which is called Red Dot, which sells its software to manufacturers like Unilever and retailers like Walmart and Target. And they use it to create stores so that from a manufacturer and supplier and a retailer point of view, they don't need to ship lots of stuff into the store and test it. It's all done in virtual reality, and the supply chain becomes a lot easier. So I think there are things like that. You talked about Google Glass, which might not have been the biggest success in the world, but which we used really successfully from a research point of view to understand how people shop stores and what they see and what they focus on. So I think there's a lot going on, but as everyone said, there's a lot more to come.
Right. Show of hands, who thinks VR is going to really take off? Yeah? We're about 50-50, I reckon, there. Okay, guys, we've got about 5 minutes left. We've got time for a couple of questions. Who's got a question to ask these, our experts? No? Okay, looks like organizers, we have 3 minutes to spare. So thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
input.
Thank you.